my mum rang me. She's like, mum doesn't normally ring me like 8 o'clock in the morning. It's 7:30 in the morning. I was like, hello? She's like, happy birthday. I was like, mum, it's tomorrow. My birthday's tomorrow.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor, enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Lloyd Williams-Jones.
Hello there.
And we're going to talk about all things strategic thinking. But first, Lloyd, what you reading for?
Hey, what you reading for?
This week, I've been reading Sarah Cottingham's Meaningful Learning. It's from the In Action series, and it's based on the work of Ausubel, and it's a fantastic read. I've really, really enjoyed it, actually. It's been really, really practical, and it's a great sort of concise summary of like how to apply the Ausubel's work to your context in learning. I particularly enjoyed this kind of idea of subsumption theory and how she explains the work on that. It's quite interesting because obviously, how concepts can be subsumed by other concepts, smaller sub-concepts that go up. And sort of, I was discussing with Neil Almond earlier in the week about like, when's the best time to reveal? I know Ausubel says about you should reveal it from the start, the sort of the highest kind of the top of the hierarchy. But it's interesting, isn't it, about like when and how we sort of expose learners to these different levels of schema and concepts and things. We're doing a little bit of work at the moment in school around nailing down our concepts for humanities and really sort of planting our flag on the ones we think are they're going to be the best for us in terms of progression. It's been really timely to be able to read that book at this point. I was fortunate enough, as I know you were, Kieran, to have a copy ahead of its release. Very, very grateful to Sarah to consider me for to reading it, and I would highly recommend you get a pre-order on that book, as it is. It's certainly one I'll be going back to time and time again to just really sharpen my thinking around that conceptual sort of those conceptual ideas and bodies of knowledge and things. Kieran, what are you reading for?
Nice. Yeah, I read that in one sitting on a train to Swansea, as it happens. I don't very often read books in one go, but it was fantastic. It was a joy to read and full of loads of stuff. So I have to try and get Sarah back on in the near future so that then we can see how her thinking's moved on since the last time we chatted about, because she was at the start of that process, I think, when Chris and I met with her. So this week I've been listening to a podcast about castles, a short history, and it's I think perfect, chef's kiss for primary teachers, because there's a lot of castles, a lot of time periods that involve castles, and I think it's something to develop that hinterland knowledge. And Paul, no, it's not Paul. Paul does the civilizations one. They changed the guy. Who's the guy that does it, Lloyd?
What was his name?
The OG guy was brilliant.
The OG man was great. I've forgotten the new guy. Oh God, his name eludes me completely. It's just such a distinct voice, isn't he? Like sort of put you to sleep voice, isn't it? It'll come to me before the end of this podcast, hopefully. Oh, what is his name? Yeah, but great. Yeah, I do listen to that episode, and it's fantastic, actually, isn't it? It's pitched really nicely, and I think primary practitioners would definitely get a lot out of that, just like you say, with that hinterland knowledge. Particularly like that bit about the sort of the pigs bringing down Rochester Castle. I thought that was quite a nice little fact there. I had no idea, and obviously the links to Kent and Wales for me were perfect, so it really chimed with me. But yeah, really good shout for that for signposting people too.
So this week, Lloyd, we're going to discuss strategic thinking. Comes off the back of a tweet that you sent out about some of the things you do for your teachers. And obviously you've been on the podcast so many times talking about your approach to leadership. But I thought that this might be some of that extra what does this actually look like on the ground that, we want to strive for as much as possible. But I think, as always, it helps with definitions. When we say strategic thinking, what do we mean?
Yeah, I think, it's as leaders, we've got a really big job, and we're often so we're so full, we're so busy with marching to get the next thing done. We need to keep on top, keep the pace up, keep making sure that we don't drop any balls and keep all the plates spinning all the time. And, I think everybody works super, super hard at trying to make sure that process happens. But I think for me, strategic thinking is allowing us to kind of almost like, I guess the analogy would be to get in a drone, go above those spinning plates and kind of look down and see all of them at once and just know, right, hang on, that one's going to fall soon. We can get on that, and I know that one will fall in a little bit of time. So you go over there and spin that one. It's a very rough analogy there, but that for me, that's the kind of thinking that leaders need to do in order to promote the best sort of cultures in their school and to protect and ensure that their staff aren't overwhelmed. That includes the senior leadership teams and the teams that are operating underneath it, senior middle leaders and obviously teachers and anybody really, support staff in a school that don't become overwhelmed or making or perhaps potentially making mistakes and missing things and then it being costly and berating yourself because often it's not, if a mistake is made or something hasn't happened in the most efficient way, it isn't because anybody's lazy or isn't because anybody's bad at what they do. It's just because the sheer volume of things that we need to consider as leaders in school and just teachers, anybody in school really, to consider is vast. As you said, like I think 3,000 decisions a day was it? That was the figure you quoted last week. I mean, and that is it, isn't it? It's if we're making that amount of decisions a day, is how we can best avoid those traps. And I think strategic thinking and being able to carve out time to be strategic avoids that. I think that's probably how I would define it.
Nice. I like the direction you're taking this metaphor, because a couple of weeks ago I did a webinar about leading at scale, and I sort of said that leading across multiple schools is like, you need to be like the Royal Variety Performance level plate spinner. You're not just any old schmo spinning plates. You know exactly where you need to be and when you need to be it. Strategic thinking, then, if you're looking at this bird's eye view, it's almost being preemptive and making decisions and putting things in place before they happen, so that you're prepared for all or most eventualities, because no one's ever prepared for all eventualities in school. Anyone who's been in school for more than 10 minutes knows that. So I think that's probably a really good starting point for where we're going to bring this conversation. If we can bring it to the tweet then, Lloyd, what was it you shared and what is it you do to try and be strategic in school?
Yeah, so what I shared this week was simply a sort of an outline of what we call our strategic dates for the year. Now, it's something that we actually worked on today as a team, and we do it at the same time every year. Now, it probably feels very early, like we're only in April, but we're already looking to next year. We're already looking to September. It was strange, obviously, talking today about July next year, but we are talking about July next year, because putting in that groundwork and being able to strategically map what you're doing is really, really important. So the process behind what that tweet I shared sort of earlier in the week, we get together as a senior leadership team as well. And this isn't something that's just done by myself or by my head Lucy. We do this as a team, and like anything strategic, realistically, needs to build your team in. I think, everybody has to be coming off the same hymn sheet, and in order for strategy to be enacted, then everybody needs to understand rationale behind the strategy. Like that's That's essential, I would say. And, and it comes into that like team building and really building strong culture for teams in schools and things. That stuff has to be there, because people have to feel a sense of ownership to strategy. They have to own strategy. And if people don't own strategy, if just strategy is just sort of done to, then it's less powerful. And that's what we found by having that kind of open strategic vision. It's been a lot easier to communicate things and a lot easier to actually iterate and become better at what we do and look up, and that was part of that process today. So we, like I say, we use a structure. It's not perfect, and there's probably other models out there. I would no doubt at all that it's a model, but it's something that we map out all of our assessment points. We map out all of our key events that are happening all the way through the year. So as a teacher, they are way before they've even entered September. They get these dates in June, July for next year. So they've got months ahead of even stepping into the new school year, where they know and everything's added to our school calendars by our office team. So it's really joined up. And I think that side of things helps. And part of the reason that helps is because when we sit around the table and look at those dates, we look for pinch points. We think, right, okay, what's going on across a year? We get sort of 6 big sheets of paper up on the wall, and term 1 to 6 on the top of them. And then we post it up, everything that we've got going on across the year that we know has happened this year, and we sort of map everything up. And as part of that wider team, we've got quite an extended SLT team. We sit around and we review and we talk to teachers and we get feedback, and we think, right, that point of the year was awful. And it was a pinch. It was an awful pinch there, because that clashed with that. Then there was that happened, and we're able to see, like you say, we're able to see those plates. I suppose at the end of the year, we can see where the plates have smashed. We're looking from that drone again, and we can see where the remnants are on the floor, and go, that was a problem there for teachers. And when we talk and we get some feedback, we go, yeah, that wasn't right. So then we think strategically about how we can move things around to split things out. Like one thing we considered this year, for example, in our strategic dates, just to illustrate for you in that, we looked, it was becoming apparent that when we do our reports, was just really heavy. Like they were going out in term 6. It was term 6 is notorious, isn't it? For it's just full as an egg, and we just need to be a bit savvy about what we do. Everybody is exhausted at that point. So what we did, we split our reports. So only our standards years are going out at that point in the year, because they have to, because of the SAT. The rest of the staff, they do their longer reports now in March. And that split, because we looked carefully about other things that were going on in March. There was less going on in March. So having that space, and we asked staff, we consulted with staff before doing this, and said, we went to phases and distributed leadership, and asked, and they said, yeah, absolutely, I think we would love to try that. It was a resounding success. Now, so today we fed back, and everybody was like, so much better. Really had the time to be able to do it without thinking, oh my days. Interestingly, people people have put their notice in sometimes to leave. None of that's happened in March, so people are still connected with the job and things. So there's, even though things like that were better, but that kind of that strategic thinking wouldn't be able to happen without doing the process of strategic dates and sitting in a room and mapping that all out on the walls and saying, actually, we need to be savvy about here to protect our teachers. So that's just one example. So those strategic dates I shared is a template there for people to use. There's a link available on the tweet. I'm sure we can put it out with when the episode goes out as well. But the bottom line is, I would encourage teams to get together. I'll also caveat that there's probably many schools that already do this as well. And I'm probably just preaching to the converted here. But there may be some schools out there that don't. And if you are one of those schools or leaders that don't potentially do this, I'd recommend it just from our personal experience. And having worked in schools prior where I haven't had this, it's so much clearer for everybody. Everybody knows what's happening. Everybody knows when it's happening. And it just brings that kind of consistency, and that it just reduces the chances of things being slipping and, like I say, those plates going down, because they're all there and everybody's bought into those dates. So even if somebody misses something, somebody else has probably picked it up and gone, oh, that's happening, isn't it? You know, if you say, oh yeah, God, yeah, you know, even if you haven't checked the dates, someone else probably has, because that's a central document and we value that document. And I think it's about that. It's about, like, when you're strategic, and it goes back to that rationale, because they value it because they see the value in it, if you see what I mean. Like they you know, they understand its power. And yeah, that so essentially that was something that I just thought, right, I'll just share this with people. Just, it might be useful in terms of like that structure and that clear thing. I know I was having a discussion with Robbie Burns, who's you know, I know he's a fan of the show, and he writes really well on different areas. You know, experienced leader himself. And his trust to do a similar thing and have very similar ideas. So I know, you know, it's definitely happening out there. His is slightly different, but, you know, I think the principles of being strategic remain, you know, with between us both. But it's something that I think could be very useful, and just you know, a sort of an element of how we are strategic in school as well.
I mean, it's funny you say about paper and getting 6 big sheets out. One of the schools I worked at recently were federated with another school, specialist school, and the maths lead said, well, can we do some action planning together? And I literally got 5 big bits of paper, and we looked at the next 5 years and we said, okay, what does this look like at the end? And then we worked our way back, just like we're doing planning. And so this is almost, you know, very similar idea, but on an annual basis. I like that. I don't know. I don't know if, you know, I don't know if I might be a kinesthetic learner or not, but I like the physical aspect of it. You know, I feel more organized sometimes when I'm writing stuff down with a pen or with a marker. You know, because computers are fine, but sometimes, you know, there's, I don't know, there's some sort of sensation you get with it that I quite like. Just makes me feel more organized, and you know, you can rearrange things in different ways. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the conversation with Robbie. I mean, how was it received in general? Because I know, like, you know, no one here is saying that this is a brand new idea. My first school, we had immovable feasts all 7 years I was there. You know, we knew when the different things were happening. I mean, there were a couple of years. I don't know if I'm remembering incorrectly or not, but I think the Diamond Jubilee and the Olympics might have been the same year.
Yeah,
There's nothing you can do about that. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I mean, obviously, you know, everything just melds into one. Like, yeah, what was the response like? I mean, did many conversations come from that?
Yeah, quite a few people have reached out and asked me a little bit more about the process. So this is a great opportunity for you to, you know, for them to hear it, and a few messages asking about, you know, how we go about putting it together and so on and so forth. And I think, you know, like you said, it is absolutely, you know, nothing new here at all. I think it's just, sometimes we just need to be a bit more vocal about this and champion strategy like this, because it does pay. So it pays forward so much. And I guess, you know, one of the things to consider is, you know, we are particularly early in doing it. And you know, there's still time yet before the end of the year to be able to do these sorts of things. But getting ahead of stuff like this strategically, it really helps, because as you come towards the end of the year, thinking strategically gets harder. I feel like we hit like almost a strategic fatigue, like that we get to like end of T5, T6 becomes extremely difficult to be like really creative with your strategic thinking, and to be like, you know, how can we be as efficient as we can? It becomes harder because you're just so tired. So I think it does definitely pay to get ahead of things and to really sort of nail down, you know, time within your working year to do these things. Now, I know people, you know, we like today we did it. We have very carefully planned in our strategic dates, funnily enough, SLT mornings where we have our whole team out together regularly every term to work on strategy and protect, you know, we protect that time carefully, and it happens like every time. And I think putting a mechanism like that in place, building that into strategic dates and things, it's so valuable, because we know we've got that protected time to work on an agenda, a strategic agenda in that morning. So, and it's things like that, you know, where you've got to build the mechanisms to allow the strategy to take place. and the strategic thinking to take place. And I think, you know, we in terms of this, the dates, for example, one of the things that came off the back of a morning we were doing was we realized that, yes, we had dates for our assessment, for example, right? Our overviews, our assessment, they were in there. But actually what we consulted and we thought, what do people need? What do our teachers need? They need an assessment overview. And on that, they also needed like dates. Not only was it like when the assessments were happening, when was things being entered onto Insight? What was the day that it would needed to be done by? And where and how it needed to be logged, all the different forms of assessment. So everything from our NFERs to our phonics check-ins to, you know, everything was on the one document. Nice. And you know, I spent time strategically mapping that out. And then we kind of put that together with our strategic dates so that staff then know they have a really clear, like, again, view of the year and when those points are. So that they don't miss them, and that they're also prompt that allows us to be able to, you know, put that alongside our progress meetings and our reporting to governors and so on and so forth. So having that kind of thinking is really important, and it helps staff to not be second guessing and scrambling around and asking, when's that due in? And, you know, checking back email threads to see when the data drop, you know, deadline was. Put it all in one place and signpost it, you know, be strategic, you know, and review it, you know, iterate it. Did that work? Were those timings right? You know, come back to something and reflect it. Don't just automatically assume, change all the dates and go on to next year. Review it, look at it, discuss it as a team and think, right, could we do it better? And I think that if you've got that mindset towards your organizational thinking as well in school, you know, I think you're going to be doing a far better job than if you're just kind of ad hoc with your communications and you're just sending emails out here and there about, you know, when things are going to due in and so on and so forth. Have a clear outline for this stuff. And like you said, Kieran, things happen. Of course, things happen. There are times where things are out of our hands. And so one of our chair of governors, our COG, said, you know, things come at you from clear blue skies. I think as he's saying, and it is that case in schools. You just can't see some things, but you can mitigate it as much as possible by putting things like this in place and carving out those mechanisms to ensure that there is time and space for strategy.
Being honest, have you got any teachers who you give a sheet with the date 2 weeks in advance of when the real date is? You know, because there was a time in my life when my family would tell me to arrive half an hour before things happened. They knew I wasn't going to arrive on time, you know. Anybody, you know, is it Jack? Is he prompt?
Oh no, Jack's the one writing he's sharp. He's writing all the timetables here. It wouldn't be him, no, definitely not.
You've already mentioned bringing everyone with you and being able to more easily or more readily iterate things. And I think you've actually done a really good job of furnishing your points with examples and reasons why, but are there any other reasons you haven't covered about why you do this? Or perhaps there's a reason why Lucy started this type of thinking that she might have shared with you, you know, because it's really clear when you've experienced strategic thinking and a paucity of strategic thinking, it's night and day. But are there any other reasons why this might be a good idea?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You know, and it's interesting because if all you've ever experienced is strong strategic kind of thinking and leadership, like you say, when you go somewhere with the eyes and this, it's blindingly obvious, like with communications and processes and routines and structures and things like that. I think one of the big reasons is that we want our staff to feel supported, to feel like there's no surprises, well, as much as possible. You know, like I said, you've got to always take into account things change and happen in a school day. But where possible, everything is as it's like how we would do with send children, you know, make things as predictable as possible for teachers, because teachers like predictability. They like it when it, you know, they know what's coming. It's like anybody, when we don't know what's coming or anybody's unsure, people tend to be more on edge, and then we get sort of poorer practice and all sorts of different things. So, that is at the heart of why we are strategic with things, is to ensure our staff feel supported and feel comfortable and are able to do the best job that they can. If, trying to free them up from as much of that kind of menial stuff that really ultimately gets in the way of learning and gets in the way of teachers thinking about pedagogy. You want to try and maximize the time that you can give to teachers to do that. So you've got to create the conditions and the culture in your school to allow that to thrive. So that, it's vitally important that you create those conditions. I think it's really interesting because, like I said, having been in a school where that wasn't the case, and having been that teacher that has just been second guessing things, I just know from experience how daunting that can feel, and just how lost you can feel at times, and disillusioned as well. You can really become, you can lose trust in your leadership team and lose trust in the team around you, because if things aren't changing and things aren't structured and things are more ad hoc and are just thrown at you. So I think that really does sit at the heart of what we do.
Yeah, you've almost got this 3-point continuum of initial response to things, and they all funnel into that mistrust and that, absence of currency. We always talk about leadership currency and things out there. When you're brand new and you get like an email saying, "We forgot about this needs to happen in the next 48 hours. You're going to cry, panic, and then spend your night doing it. A little bit more experience, perhaps you might just laugh and say, well, tough. And then at the very other end of the continuum, you might swear and say things that you're not allowed to on a non-explicit podcast. But all of those, no matter what your initial response is to that kind of email, if it happens too often, well, then you're like, well, I'm not buying into anything that's happening here, because, why should I? I deserve to be organized, and then obviously, I can't say that I've always been 100% the most organized person in the world, but you've got to try for others, I think, when you're in a position of leadership, to put their needs first. Nobody's perfect, but it's certainly not fair on our least experienced teachers, who need probably more time to think about the things that they will be doing possibly for the first time, because even the things that we take for granted, like Special People Day or whatever sort of day you celebrate for around Mother's Day and Father's Day, that can be really stressful. But for an experienced teacher, the logistical stuff, it's just, you just breeze through it. So, you got to think about that extra load. So yeah, I think massively important that leaders are strategic, if not for the benefit it brings to the rest of their aims and the ease of that process of sort of moving school forward and stuff. So, I'd be really interested to find out, how did this develop and where's it going to next? Because obviously what you do now has come from somewhere, and it's not going to be perfect yet. So, what's that journey like?
That's a really good question. And I think you're absolutely right. We are definitely on journey. I didn't come into this role and start doing all of this stuff at once. This has been a journey, a development of like, I like to think I'm a strategic thinker, and Lucy, my head, is 100% a strategic thinker. And I've learned an unbelievable amount from her about that, and how to really, really think carefully about, to really think as well, like outside the box, and to step back and really get high up in the air above those plates, because you've got to be bold and brave as a leader to do that sort of stuff as well. Sometimes, I'm just thinking about like where we were when we started, and how we've moved with different systems and different routines. And I'll illustrate a few examples in a minute that hopefully will give you enough flavor of how we've moved with things. But I would definitely say one of the big things that's actually come from the national professional qualification materials from Ambition, and which I know ultimately have come from the DFE working group. One of the big the big pieces of advice, like from that Lucy and I do now religiously, is what they class as a pre-mortem. And it's this, the idea of always in any situation that when we're starting to think about things that we, we want to be strategic on, what is the worst case scenario? What if everything went wrong? What's the, what the sort of pre-mortem? If it's all burnt down in flames, what's that look like? And work from there. And I think if you employ that approach as a leader, you tend to mitigate a lion's share of what can go wrong. And by doing that, you make you're more strategic, because you account for different situations, and you kind of have a wider perception of something. Whereas sometimes, problem here, we need to fix the problem. Where we need to go, problem here, what are all the possible options that it can do? Let's fix it by covering all those bases. And I think that thinking, for me, we didn't have that at the start. There's no way, and Lucy will be the first to tell you, when I started at the school and we didn't think like that. We were solving problems. We were looking at problems, solving. We were being strategic, but we weren't being thorough and as considered with how we approach things. So I really, really would urge leaders to think in that way. I think that's really, really important. When we came in, from where the school's been on a journey from when, we were in RI and things, certainly when Lucy arrived and when systems and routines and procedures just weren't in place in the school, we looked and thought, right, we need to improve. We identified the key areas that we know, obviously NSF and the SLP. They are your key documents that will help you identify those areas for doing things. Ultimately, those strategic documents that all schools have to have, great. But when we looked at moving things on, we carefully considered and iterated along the journey how we could get better. And I think that is a massive part of it. Again, along with the pre-mortem thinking, is iteration, and reflection, is constantly coming back to something and going, does that work? What are we sure? Are we sure that's the best way to do it? Let's consult. Let's adapt and respond. And now let's move forward, and let's adjust accordingly and move on. And doing that process all the time is like, will be baked into strategic thinking. And I think, like, take a couple of examples from what we did. Our behavior, for example. So when I arrived, we didn't have any way. We had a paper system for tracking behavior, reflections were recorded on there and things. There was some analysis, but it was very, very, very limited. We looked at it and thought, well, we know we've got to have a really good handle on everything that's going on and a way to do that. So we obviously got CPOMs, like many schools did. So that was our kind of like, right, we see CPOMs, great. We're looking at it. And in the first instance, it was, look at that. Having reflected on it and thought, right, hang on, we need to go further than this, because whilst, yes, we are recording on CPOMs and we've got a clear systems and routines and how different levels of leaders get tagged into different incidents and responded to and so forth, we realized we've got to analyze this stuff. We've got to break it down. And I looked at ways of reporting, and there's a myriad of ways to report on CPOMs. What I will add for anybody who's a CPOMs user, it's not straightforward. It is a quite difficult system to navigate. It's not insight friendly, as I would class it. It takes a lot more depth of thinking, and you have to really know what you're trying to present if you are. But when you do know how to collate, and I think I did share a tweet before, a little video tweet about how to generate certain reports in CPOMs. I'm happy to circulate that again. But by doing that, we then went, right, hang on, let's analyze, let's look for trends, let's start to track. And what we did, we're far more strategic now in the way we address behavior. So we report to governors and we report to stakeholders with an overview, and we look back at the previous term, we track trends, we look for where certain pinch points of areas of behavior are happening, and we review every Monday at an SLT meeting. So we generate this report every Monday for SLT, and it's a standing item agenda. We go through it, we look for trends, we say, okay, hang on, we've got a cluster of incidents here in the girls' toilets in year 6. What's going on here? And then it allows us to respond accordingly. We then distribute, look at our phase leaders. Can you look into that? Come back, report, just feedback in on next week on any actions on that. Being strategic, like that's one element of how our behavior moved from paper copies to a careful analysis on a weekly basis that feeds into a bigger picture of behavior in the school and allows us to then report to governors, and it gives us a really, really excellent handle on every single child and where any behavior is happening and how we're dealing with it. So that, as a behavior example of how we moved. I suppose another example that would perhaps usefully illustrate this would be our induction process. So prior to, again, when, and this recruitment's difficult, we know the current climate, things are hard, particularly for one-to-ones, and, and the landscape is challenging. It's really challenging. And what we're finding is obviously, we'd recruit our avatar, we do all of our recruitment in that way. People would land, right, okay, yeah, you're going to pair up with those, and off we go, and we'll check in with you. We'll check in with you tomorrow and see how you go. And we had that. We sort of, when we stepped back and looked at our staffing and how we, upskill people and keep people, we had, again, we discussed this at our meetings and our senior leadership mornings. We realized, hang on, our induction process isn't strong enough, or, our onboarding, if you want to use the Vogue term. But it wasn't, it wasn't strong enough. And we reflected and we thought, we've got to be more strategic about how we run this process. So, we knew that wasn't where we needed it to be. So through a process of, again, we put together induction packs, an induction pack for a HLTA, an induction pack for a one-to-one or a TA, an induction pack for a teacher, so that we know that when they join the school, there's a really clear organizational structure for them landing. We've just had 2 new members of staff start from Easter, and we got like a TA in year 1, and she gets a 2-week induction period, where the first week they literally they're observing, they're buddied with strategically buddied with somebody who we know will sort of demonstrate and model the things they need to see for that aspect of their job. They then have regular check-in points morning and afternoon. We then build in time across the week with key members of staff to update them on different policies, bits, modeling. And then, like you say, there's that capping of the start and end of the day where they come and meet Lucy and myself, and we feedback and we troubleshoot. At the end of the first week, we then have a review meeting. We shape their next week of induction, and then they go off again. And the feedback we've had from staff on that, for example, has been really, really excellent. Like, people have said they hadn't experienced that in schools, and they've just been thrown in and get on with it kind of thing. Because I get it, schools are desperate. People need boots on the ground. They need to get in with children. But it's worth that strategic effort to be like, actually, if we spend some time codifying, working out exactly what we need, once that work's done. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's there. It then exists. It's there. People get used to it. It's not then a big burdensome, I've got to write our own induction again. Well, no, we've got models there that we use, and in they come, and we iterate that all the time. Was that enough time? Do they need a 3-week induction if they're working with a really complex SEMH child? Maybe they do, and so we're constantly in that process of being strategic around things like that. But then the retention of staff on the back of things like that, the staff feeling valued. God, they really care about me here. Like, they put in all this, getting timetables to staff ahead of them starting. Those induction timetables go out, days and days before they even arrive with us at school, from the link person who is, the phase that they're coming into and things. So, that's another way. Now, I'm not going to, I could go on forever about different things that we do strategically, but hopefully there's sort of some kind of examples to illustrate how it pays to give that level of strategic thinking to things, because ultimately I'll go back to that point of your staff feeling massively, massively supported and feeling valued and feeling like actually things, our leadership team really take care of us here. They really think about our workload. They really carefully don't overload us, and we don't want them to be overwhelmed by implementations and too many implementations at once, and keeping them plates off the floor. Yeah,
if you want to improve outcomes for people, just invest in your staff. That's the most efficient and effective way I can see. What's it going to take to convince Lucy to talk to Research Ed about her approach to leadership? She's reticent. I mean, she has been to Research Ed, hasn't she?
She's a big fan of Research Ed, and she goes every year to the national. I just can't pin it down. I can't get her on here. I can't get her to do a talk. She won't take the credit that she deserves. She's, what I've learned from her, and where she learned from, she was in the Gypsy Hill Federation in London, and that's where she sort of really, really learned this, honed her craft and understood that big federated level of strategic thinking. And it's just, I just learn all the time from it. But I'll try and I'll keep banging that drum of trying to get her on here and get her to talk at research as well. I don't know if I'll be successful, but if not, I'll have to act as a conduit. I'll have to be the person who constantly sings her praises and delivers. Again, I'm not for 1 minute taking credit for all of that stuff. That is not just my ideas. There's a team of ideas, and that's a good team of people. I'm very lucky to work with an extremely talented senior leadership team at that school that Lucy has carefully built and grown and nurtured. And it pays so much to have a team around you like that can be so emotionally intelligent and so responsive with things, to be able to operate on that strategic level that we do.
A couple of weeks ago, I asked you to write me a song with the energy of Jack Black that thanked our wonderful Ko-fi supporters for their contributions every month that help us sort of make the podcast a little bit better all the time. Now, here's the thing. Nobody has mentioned it. So either we have subscriptions that people have forgotten about and they haven't listened to the podcast for a long time, or they didn't like it. I mean, what's your response to that, Lloyd?
I think the latter, mate, probably is the honest truth. They probably were like, what is that dribble that's jumped in the middle of Brendan and you having such wonderful conversation last week or the week before? No, that was, it was quite the task you set me there, but I think I hit the brief just about, perhaps. But yeah, no, shout out to the Ko-fi crew and appreciate their continued support, because it keeps things in the boiler house ticking over, doesn't it? So again, a massive shout out to them. Thank you.
Keeps the furnace on. We've got I've managed to sort the transcripts, because now Ko-fi subscribers can get transcripts to individual questions, and it's a new question each week. Nice. Because the big episode transcripts were proven pretty troublesome to edit. Different software products have different success rates. So what I've gone for now is this question, 10 minutes of content. You can share it with staff. You've got the transcript. Here you go. So you've got Suchmo Neil talking about orthography. One of the ones I did recently was Michael Pershins explaining what self-explanation was. So, there you go. Here's a transcript you can share with them, with others. So let's listen to your song as we say thank you to everyone who sponsors. And yet, if you haven't been on the Ko-fi page for a while, go back and check it out, because there's stuff there for you.
For all of you Ko-fi, Ko-fu-fu, however you pronounce it, you damn lovely supporters. It's a song going out to you, to you. Okay, here we go. Nikki Anna P. Septi, Stephanie Taylor, Mrs. B. Isatea, Adam, Katie, Liv Dempsey, Becca, Jenfred, Susie, Brown, and Theo, Netchio, Rachel, I am Al, Jessica, Tom Oakley, Tom Brassington. Jessica, Tom Oakley, Tom Brassington, LJ. And last but not least, my lovely little Amy Bill. So they help us pay the bills. So a massive thank you out to Dappy family. Coffee supporters help us keeping it ad-free. There's far more content coming just round the bend. Thank you all for helping our very special friends.
It's funny because I was listening to a podcast today again. I know we've mentioned a couple already today. There's a good podcast on BBC Sounds called "A Very British Cult," and it focuses on Lighthouse Global, who are like particularly crook organization by the sounds of things. But they're sort of esteemed leader, how they capture the transcripts. They essentially have like coerced teams of people. So they have like the initial people who will type down the like symbols almost of what is being said, like abbreviated words. Then there's a team of people behind them who fill in the full sentences. Then there's a team of people behind them, and they basically have waves of people. And there's a team behind them who put it into paragraphs and underline it, and they basically like produce these like full transcripts, like beautiful headed, like I mean, albeit through coercion and like mass control and cultish behavior. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that the Ko-fi crew need to start that practice, because I think we'd probably be in trouble with some sort of ombudsman or like standards agency of some sort. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. So
I'm the only humans involved in the making of these transcripts. We've got a team of artificial intelligence servants working for us, behind the scenes, doing so much onto that way, that you wouldn't believe it. We've talked about very specific examples in your school, Lloyd. What do you think the strategic keys to school improvement are, if we talk in more general terms?
Firstly, you have to ensure an open culture. So making sure that you have an open door policy and that your leadership teams aren't siloed and operating behind closed doors. You need to get people around be prepared to get people around the table and open things up together, and sometimes that is daunting to leaders, because as leaders, we want to control things. We want to make sure things are, but having your leadership team, an extended leadership team, sometimes the leaders around the table to do that, it starts with that, because in order to be strategic, you need to be bold and brave, and you need to be open. And that starts, it starts there with having that. I would say that's really, really, really key. I would say build the another key point is like build the mechanisms into your year to allow you to be strategic. So what I mean by that is like, carve out the time to be strategic. And you can't always be strategic, at 4:45 on a Monday at the end of an SLT meeting. Sometimes that's just not the time to be strategic, because you're exhausted, you've got a full day, you're trying to thrash something out. And actually what will happen then is, rather than being strategic, you can actually be sometimes a little bit irrational in your decision making and things as a team. So I would say make time and space to be strategic. That's really, really important. So like have that protected time to do it. I think that's absolutely vital as well. I think the probably the third thing I'd add is base your strategy in people. And what I mean by that is, at the core of what you do, the rationale must stem from looking after people and being on a level where you're supporting other teachers and leaders and anybody in the school to be better at what they do. That's where your strategic thinking needs to come from. It's not necessarily to impress people. It's not to impress stakeholders or other schools. I'm all for sharing. Of course, I wouldn't be here talking about it if I wasn't. But make sure you ground what you do in that rationale, and then it comes back to teachers and people and the teams that you so carefully nurture and build in your schools. They're probably my three. I would say that I would be really important.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's the minimum amount of decency you can have for the people you work with and the people that you're charged with leading to create this kind of environment that allows them to thrive. So yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. I don't think there's any more I can add to it. Just that it's been fascinating talking with you as always about this stuff. Really appreciate it. And I know it won't be the last time we come to leadership, and I'm looking forward to seeing maybe in a couple of years' time how this has developed. And maybe it won't be a whole episode, but definitely part of an episode where we saw, well, strategically, what are you doing in 2025 that you weren't doing in 2023?
Yeah.
So interesting. I think all I have to do is say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you very much.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.